Hi everyone. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what's my story? What's my story with an eating disorder? I mean, pretty much anyone out there in the void knows that I consider myself recovered. Um, a lot of people out there know that my specific eating disorder was anorexia, and they know that my eating disorder is a part of my past, but they don't really know much about my past. And I'm one of those people that really feels that it's more important to look to the future than to look back at the past. So, on my blogs and in my videos, I pretty much give self help tips and advice and talk about things that have worked for me and discuss things that are in the media or discuss things that apply to eating disorder sufferers. I talk about recovery and prevention and things like that. But I don't really talk about myself a lot. I mean, I might delve into personal experience here and there in answer to a viewer question or to a reader question, but I don't tend to go back and lay out for you what happened with me in my entire life. But I do get asked this question a lot, so I thought, just this once, I can give you guys a backstory if you're interested so you know where I am coming from. I'm going to actually make this video in parts because I think that when I start talking and going back through the years, I'm going to find that I talk a lot, and videos can only be up to 10 minutes long on YouTube, so I'm going to break it up, do a little memoir style video list for you. So if I'm wearing different clothes or my hair is different or anything like that, it's because I'm going to keep sitting down and making this video whenever I have a chance and sort of continuing the story. I basically developed an eating disorder fully at age 18. That's when I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. But I definitely had disordered eating prior to that, and I definitely had a lot of, for lack of a better term, mental health issues regarding food and eating and things like that well before I turned 18. So if I was going to pinpoint the start of anything when seeds were sown, I would start with age 11 when I was in sixth grade. And I was a popular kid. I was a popular girl. I was well liked by boys and girls and by teachers and things like that. And everything was going really well for me. And it was also a time in my life when I was developing, and a lot of my friends were not. And basically, what happened is I was shunned by everyone I knew. People just sort of ganged up on their own and decided that they weren't going to be my friends anymore. They weren't going to speak to me. So I wasn't spoken to at all. I was completely alone. And if I was paid attention to, it was to give me hateful notes and letters. To make a long story short, I was a victim of bullying. And it's your classic mean girl scenario, and it happened to me, and it was horrible. I mean, I went home crying every single day, and my mom would sit there and tell me that it was jealousy, and I just I mean, I still don't really know what what it was all about, but I mean, at the time especially, it seemed like that was something that any mother would say. So it didn't really comfort me. But I mean, I was absolutely miserable, and school was just a living hell for me. It was terrible. Um, but what made it really bad is that most of the girls that were being so mean to me were my friends, and they were my friends no longer. So I had no one. And, I remember times of teachers pulling me out of class and, asking me if I was okay, if everything was all right, because they could tell that something wasn't quite right with me anymore. And it was around that time that I became a vegetarian for no good reason whatsoever. And instead of being a healthful vegetarian, I basically just cut out all meat, which meant if my family was having chicken, a baked potato, and green beans for dinner, I just ate the potatoes and green beans, which obviously is not a well-balanced meal, and I did that with every meal. So when I was already 11, I wasn't eating normally. And I think it was a coping mechanism because it happened around the same time as all of the bullying. And I did have one very, very good friend at that time, and she was a saving grace because I was going through so many things, and she was basically my only friend. She was the only one who stood by me. And then after a year, lo and behold, all of the kids that had been bullying me just stopped as though nothing had ever happened and went back to being my friend. But I was never the same. I was really changed. I was really shy and quiet and had basically made a pact with myself that I would never do anything or say anything to make people treat me that way again, because it was the most awful thing that I had experienced to date. So it really changed me because it happened at a very detrimental part in my life and in my development. And I I had a good adolescence from that point onward for the most part, but that one year really affected me. Well, when I was 17, turning 18, I went away to college, and I went to University of Delaware actually, and the transition was really hard for me. I was no longer a vegetarian. I had only been a vegetarian from age 11 to age 15, and then just as easily as I had started, I stopped and went back to eating the right foods. I think something sort of clicked with me that I was a lot happier, and when I was happier, I didn't need the coping mechanism. So that's always interesting for me to realize now as an adult. But when I went away to college, it was a transition thing, and it was hard for me to deal with again. And I was away from home, and I was making new friends, which, came very easily. And I met basically the greatest friends of my life while I was in college. But at the time, it was very, very interesting. I actually wanted to transfer my first semester in college because I was so unhappy, but I think it had a lot more to do with me and inner turmoil than it had to do with anything external with the university. Um, but what happened was I went home over winter break, my freshman year of college, my first year, and while I was home, something happened, to me, and I can't really pinpoint what it was, but I remember that I started keeping a notebook of all the things that I ate and all the calories, and from there, everything just went downhill. Um, I ended up going back to school for the second half of my first year, dropped a lot of weight, and got really sick and scared my friends to death. And I ended up getting help for myself right away without being prodded, even though I was confronted by my best friend later on. She hadn't known that I had gone to the counseling center. But basically, I wasn't eating and I was doing really poorly. My grades suffered because I was so sick. I was just so ill, especially physically. And you can't keep up with college when you're not healthy. But what happened was I ended up over spring break, which was just a week, in my second semester of my first year of college. I got picked up at school in the car by my mom and my mom's best friend. And on the long drive home, I told my mom and her best friend that I had something that I wanted to talk to them about. And before we got home, if we could stop at Barb's house, she's my mom's best friend, if we could stop at her house and go inside, I wanted to talk to them together. And I thought it would be easier that way because my mom would have some moral support then, and they would be able to deal with it together, and it would make me feel better and safer not doing it around my father at home. So that's what I did. We stopped, and I'm sure they were thinking all kinds of things: drugs, pregnancy, rape. I don't know what they were thinking in their minds because I probably scared them. Although I did try to wait till the drive was nearly over before bringing it up to them. But I came clean to my mom that I thought I had an eating disorder, and I told her about my habits. And I knew that they were aware that something was going on with me because I was extremely, extremely thin, and I didn't look good, and I wasn't right. But my mom got me help. She got me in to see an eating disorder specialist who I loved and I ended up seeing for almost 6 years. And she was a licensed clinical social worker, which is what I'm going to grad school to become. So that's pretty cool because she definitely helped me a lot. So I always have that in the back of my mind.